Oh, and here we are in the heart of Venice Beach. Walked here, but we probably could have ran here because my next guest is one of the most iconic runners I've ever met and one of the best stories you're ever about to hear. Meredith Dolhare from Charlotte, North Carolina. You've been all over the United States in terms of where you've lived. UCLA, you grew up in Memphis, and eventually transferred to Vanderbilt. But you have such a brilliant story that I only know a sliver of, and hoping we can dive into elements of it today. So first and foremost, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So running. When you hear the word running, what goes through your mind?
Basically, the first thing I would say is that the first thing that comes to mind is really that running saved my life. I mean, I grew up playing tennis, but really it's running that in the long run that saved my life. I used to run even at Vanderbilt. I was the crazy girl that was running in the middle of the night up and down the steps at like 3 o'clock in the morning when people were going out. I lived on the 8th floor of an apartment building, and I would strap on my tune belt and run the steps, and then the elevator doors would open and I would be like in workout clothes and they would be coming in all hammered from going out. And I think that kept me out of a lot of trouble even in college, even though I was playing tennis on scholarship at Vanderbilt. So it saved my life a number of times just by keeping me focused and all the values that are accrued from, you know, the discipline, the confidence, and just even self-respect that you get from it.
Okay, that's a big answer. Running saved my life.
I know it sounds dramatic, but in my case, it's actually true.
Yeah, I've often said that about a ball. Right? I think a ball saved my life because it gave me direction. Right, it got me to college. It got me to California. It's got me to a lot of things. But I don't know if my life was ever truly in danger. I think it directed my life. It gave me a guidance. It was a North Star for me. So going back to it, like if it saved your life, then you're on the other side. The dark side of that sentence is...
yes, there's definitely a dark side to me. I've had some pretty significant trauma. I had some issues growing up, both familial issues and, you know, I got bullied majorly growing up. I was always kind of the gawky redheaded kid with the glasses and the curly hair and big buck teeth. And then I went on to, I got raped when I was 16, and I kind of threw my first ism was perfectionism because I just, I couldn't ever be good enough. So I played tennis, but I also ran while I was playing tennis because it would clear my head. And then later in life, I became an addict and an alcoholic, and it's running that, I've gotten tons of treatment, tons of therapy, but in the end, all the money that went into that, it's ended up being running that saved my life. And that's free.
Wow. A couple of years ago, I went for a long walk in Spain, in Portugal. It was called the Camino de Santiago, and I went with my dad. And throughout that, I went through every decade of his life. Every day, we'd sit down, and I'd interview him, and I'd learn about things that, of course, I never knew about him. But one line he said is one that I'll never forget. And he said, "Man is made to move, and we move through things." Oh. We went on that walk because my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I never dealt with it at all, let alone well. And then I said, well, I got a lot of questions, man. Like, I need to process this, but man is made to move, and we move through things. So when did you recognize that running allowed you to move through things?
Oh, it took me a while, actually. I used to think that I could put things in little boxes, like up on a shelf, and I didn't have to deal with them. I didn't have to walk through them, which is how I ended up with a substance abuse issue. It was real easy for me to just drown it out with substances and not deal with it, but that always catches up with you. The fire is still burning inside, and it creates these embers that are going to eventually come out sideways. Things start to fall apart. The wheels come off, I can guarantee you. So I had to really take a look at, pull the boxes off the shelf and let Pandora's box come open. And I have to walk through the fire in order to get to the other side and really take each one of the issues and deal with them. Not just one big issue, I have trauma, but each individual issue that I had to deal with it, walk through it, get to the other side, and then realize that I only have a daily reprieve from that. It's not something that, I dealt with it, now it's over. I still only have a daily reprieve from that. I have to work on it every single day. I can't act like I'm done with it, which I've also had, I thought I was, but no, it's something I have to do every day. And running really helps me do that.
Mentor of mine, two guys I call my board of life. One of them is Kevin Carroll. I'm going to give you his book before we leave today. It's called The Rules of the Red Rubber Ball. It's my favorite book other than The Alchemist. There's like my two Bibles in all of life. But he's a guy who always says we got to stay in beta. You're always in beta, Yogi. You're always in beta, like a computer or like an app. Like you're always constantly sharpening your edge. You're always working at it. So I'd like to ask you where it began. Because for you, it physically was in Memphis, Tennessee. But I'm curious for you, where did you develop or recognize a drive? Because to run the things we're going to get into here in this conversation, it had to begin somewhere, I'd imagine.
Oh, gosh. I was the most driven child. It's actually scary. Having children now, I realize I have one that's like that, who's just insanely driven, and he actually scared me a little bit because he's super driven, but I was actually like a machine. And I realized that it was a problem. I actually probably should have been slowed down. I mean, from the age of 5, once I stopped sucking my thumb, I mean, I was a holy terror. I was the kid on the soccer field. I actually would just plow over people. I mean, at 4, I was on the soccer field and I was sucking my thumb and staring at my cleats because I thought they were pretty. They took the thumb out of my mouth. The next year I was scoring 6 goals a game and plowing over people. And I didn't care who was in my way, but I was going to win at all costs. And the drive started there. Then they put a tennis racket in my hand at 6, 7, and they would drag me to my sister's tennis tournaments. And I was like, well, why can't I play in the tournament? So they started putting me in the U10 age group. And my parents said I would grab every racket that we owned and I would carry them on the court to intimidate my opponent at age 8. So I'd carry like 5 rackets on the court and then I would win. I won my first tournament at age 8 in the U12 age group. And I walked up to the net and I said, how old are you? And she's like, I'm 12. And I went, I'm 8. So, I mean, I was a little brat and I was hyper driven from that age. So obviously there's something in me where I'm very competitive, but I'm not cutthroat. I'm always pulling for somebody else too. I've been on teams where I never want to do it at the expense of somebody else, but I'm very driven myself. So it started really young, which is also why when I had my issues at 16, I threw myself into something productive at the time because I was still so focused on my schoolwork, so focused on getting a scholarship to college, so focused on looking good, like, don't look at me, nothing's wrong. So that's how all that happened because I just wanted to be the best at everything.
I think there's something there to athletically minded individuals. And those individuals could be working in a bunch of different professions. But I think when we go back to our athletic years, for some of us maybe that didn't continue to run, and as you have ran all over the globe, we can compartmentalize a lot. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to go to work. Screw it, whether it's my coaches on my butt or my mom or my personal life or, God forbid, something intense as you had just described. Why do you think athletes have that mental flexibility? I mean, that's a skill set to be able to say, whatever, I'm just going to go to work.
Well, I think that's partially, I mean, if you actually look at a lot of really good athletes, sometimes when they stop what they're doing, they do end up with substance abuse issues. It's kind of an ism. That's that workaholic. That's that perfectionistic. So workaholism, perfectionism, it's an ism. So sometimes when things slow down, we have alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever because things slow down and we don't know what to do with ourselves. Like if you quit the NFL and your career's over, all of a sudden your identity's gone. Like, what are you doing? Who am I? What's next? So there's a lot of things that come with that. But I think that the hyper-driven individual always needs to be busy. There's got to be a next thing. That's what I've found. Yeah.
So what were you driven to? Like, was there a goal? Because you were the best. You win the tournament. You're 8. You're like, hey, what's up? You're 12. Let's roll. And then you find yourself full athletic scholarship to UCLA. And just for the record, for those that don't know about women's sports and Olympic sports specifically, there's not a lot of full scholarships. It's 10% to you, 50% to you. And you get a free ride to come out from Memphis to SoCal. Kind of, I'd imagine it was a tennis hotbed at the time when you were coming out of high school. So back to the question of what do you think you were driven to?
Well, first of all, I didn't come from a wealthy family. So I knew that I needed to, if I wanted a really good education at wherever I wanted to go, whether it was Stanford, whether it was UCLA, Cal, first of all, I wanted to go to the West Coast. So it's like, okay, I got to be the best because it's the best in the West Coast. All the schools were top 5 in the country. Stanford, UCLA, Cal was like 7th. And I was looking also, Arizona was top 10. These were the schools I was looking at. Also Texas. And I was driven to get a full ride at one of these schools that I really respected. You know, I had blinders on to come out west. So I was hyper focused and driven on keeping my grades up, getting a good score on the SAT. You know, I had to get every award at school, Beta Club, National Honor Society, cum laude, anything that you could get at school, I had to get it. If I didn't get it, I probably would have fallen apart because I was that competitive. So it was at school too. And then I knew I wanted to go out west, so I had to qualify for every team, intersectionals. I needed to be top 10 in the country in tennis. So I had all these little goals. Top 10 in the country was definitely one of them coming out of juniors, because if you're top 10, you can pretty much choose where you want to go. You also have to have a good attitude. So I was a little bit of a stinker on the court. You can probably tell by even the way I'm talking. I can be kind of an ass. So that was, I was a work in progress, but some coaches liked that because I had spunk and I was not going to lose. You know, I could be down 6-0, 5-0 and potentially come back and win the match. I was a kind of a, you never knew what was going to happen with me. So, some of them liked that, some of them didn't. And I really, really wanted to go to UCLA because I had taken a visit, and actually the Olympic Festival had been there summer before my senior year, and I fell in love with it. I absolutely loved it. I wanted to go there over Stanford. I wanted to go there over anywhere because I love the campus. I love LA. And so once that happened and an Olympic Festival was here, which is only the top, it's the top 5 in the country, go to Olympic Festival for tennis or for any sport. I was there with Shaq and like everybody else. It was very cool. I was done. Like UCLA was it. And I knew I had to do certain things to get it. I actually committed in August of my senior year. So I was a very early commit.
Yeah, I asked that because, I don't know if you know this, I was a walk-on at Pitt. And my dream was, I want to play Division I football. I can't turn on the TV. I remember this like yesterday. I was like, I can't turn on the TV on Thursday night and see anybody else playing and me at a smaller school. And it's why I didn't go to Delaware or Ithaca or Princeton or these other schools that were good. And I might have been able to be a star or a 4-year starter, but I was like, I can't swallow that. So I'm driven to being big time. And I think when I was there, it was what I was driven to was so right in front of me. I never saw a bigger picture. And I think that happens with athletes to the point of when the drop off happens, the identity's gone, or you're so lost because you never even took a second to glimpse for like what sport can do for me down the road. Right. I could create a nonprofit as you have right now. We're going to talk about your company a bunch throughout this conversation, but were you that way? Because you go UCLA and then transfer. Well,
I'll tell you, I was. I did not. When Vanderbilt recruited me, because I was from Memphis, I was like, I would never go to Vanderbilt. I mean, I was such a brat. And I can openly say, Duke, I would never go to Duke. Now I look at these schools because I live in the area and I'm like, what an asshole. I mean, I was like, no, I would never go here. I would never go here. I don't want, Vanderbilt, Duke, all these great, Harvard recruited me. And I'm like, no way, I would never go there. They're not even top 25. Just so D1 driven. I mean, I got recruited heavily by Harvard. I had great grades. I had a great SAT score. And I was like, psh. And I wasn't thinking down the line what Harvard could do for me or what Duke or Vanderbilt could do for me, because now I'm seeing it. And the amazing thing is, it's for lack of better words, it's a God thing, because I did end up at Vanderbilt and I ended up with the most amazing coach, ironically, who came from Duke, who now Vanderbilt has won national championships. When I got there, we were 72nd in the country. So everyone thought I was nuts going to Vanderbilt. Okay, nuts. Also turned down Notre Dame, where all my family went. My whole family went to Notre Dame. 3 of my relatives are in the Hall of Fame for sports. And I was like, nope, not good enough. So finally I go to Vanderbilt. Duke coach comes. We go from 72nd in the country to 8th in 3 years, which is amazing. I was part of something really magical in this growth and development of a program that has now won a national championship, beating UCLA in the finals. Hell yeah. Which was the coolest thing ever. And my major was human and organizational development. Think about that. What other college or university has a human and organizational development major that I'm actually using? And a minor in Spanish, which I'm actually using because we help some people that, I have to use my language skills. So it's really kind of a cool metamorphosis of, I thought I would never go there, and we get this awesome coach from Duke who's still there 25 years later. It's just a really cool story.
It's brilliant. So this podcast is all based on one question, which is, what does it mean to be human? right? So here is someone sitting across from me who studied literally humanity and organization. So when it was disorganized for you, when was that at its lowest? When were you like, well, I maybe need to lean on that degree, the degree I got a little bit?
Well, I mean, I've struggled. I still struggle. I'm not someone who's going to sit here and tell you I've got it all together, because I don't. I still struggle, especially because you never know what you start. I started this organization, RunningWorks, because I felt like, A, like I said, running saved my life. B, I've had all this help with trauma and with all sorts of trauma, with addiction, with substance abuse, and the people that we're helping, they're invisible. Nobody helps them. But our stories are so alike. They're not different. They're more alike than they are different. And people just walk by them. I've actually dressed up and stood on the street with a couple of my guys, and people are so rude. They just walk by. But if it was me standing there that needed help, they would help me in a heartbeat. So the help that we give them is something that, running and mental health help, substance abuse help is something that we give them freely. Running like I said, running is free. I realized that when I was doing all my racing, I was getting a lot of press and a lot of things were happening, and especially because I did some really crazy stuff. And I was like, well, I don't want to, raise all this money and give it to a charity that's, thousands of miles away, even though they're a very worthy charity. I want to do something in my own backyard with people I can touch and get my own hands dirty, because they're suffering the very same things that I do on a daily basis, but they don't have access to care. They don't have any of the access that I did. And for one thing, we can start with the values accrued through running, and then hopefully they learn to trust. And as they learn to trust, we can help them with bigger and bigger things. And that's what's happened. Yeah,
and RunningWorks is this incredible organization that you've created in Charlotte, and it's helping people that are homeless, people that are going through addiction, that are going through just troubling times in their life. And what I love the idea of it is the words, like running works. Like, it's not, you could say it one way or the other, right? Yeah. You can say the RunningWorks company, or you could say running works. Again, we go back to humans are made to move, and we move through things. Mm-hmm. When did you fall in love with running? Because I feel as though I'm just trying to read between the lines here. That's my job. Of you ran to get through stuff because it took you somewhere. At some point, I'd imagine you fell for running. It became a joyful thing versus running through something as the art and craft of running.
So I did my first Ironman in 2008 after I had broken my foot twice, and they put a screw in it. The first time they didn't put a screw in it, and the second time they did, because they should have the first time. It's a Jones fracture like Aaron Rodgers has. So they put a screw in the length that runs the length of the fifth metatarsal. And they're saying I'm not going to run anymore. And I'm like, oh, this is 2008, mind you. So there's been a lot of running since then. And I was like, well, I'm going to do an Ironman, like whatever, it's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and a marathon at the end. And in the marathon at the end, I had, so it was my first one, and I didn't really know how to pace myself. I wasn't sure what I was going to have left because it was my first one. So I'm at like 10K out from the end of the race, and I realized I have a lot left in the tank. I'm thinking, I look at my coach. My coach was there because I had a pretty good coach, and he had come down, and because they thought I might have some potential. And I look at him, and I'm like way out at the, it's a straight shot 10K back. And I said, I think I got a lot left. And he's like, no, you're going to cramp. He didn't believe in me. He's like, you might cramp. No, don't run too fast. I'm like, I'm going for it. Are you kidding me? So I ran like 7:30s back for the last 10K because I wanted to go under 11:30, which is a pretty good benchmark for your first one. I didn't know what I was doing. I truly had no idea. And so I get in there. I mean, I ran really fast back. Where I was, I probably should have come in at like 12 hours. And I ran really fast back, and I got in at 11:26. And I think I fell in love with running on the way back. I was like, this is awesome. I had run a lot in my lifetime, and I had trained a lot. And this was the first time I'd actually trained for something. And I loved it. I felt so great. There's so many people out there at Ironmans. If people don't know, there's thousands of people. It's a movement. There were like 3,500 people out on the course, and everybody's suffering. It's like you're all suffering together. People are throwing up, people are farting, people are peeing on themselves. It's just a disaster, but I love it. It's a beautiful disaster because everybody's commiserating. It's just this wonderful thing together. And it's part of what I love about Ironman, because you'll see somebody you would never expect to be able to do that coming in at 17 hours, but it's just awesome that they're out there doing it. Yeah. That's the best part, is standing at the finish line for the people who come in last. And you're like, that person just did an Ironman. Nobody else has an excuse. Nobody. But I fell in love with running at my first Ironman, I would say, because it was just incredible, like running back. And then I stayed out there watching every single other person cross the finish line. And that's when I realized that A, I'm a runner. B, I love running. And I didn't have my nonprofit yet. I was like, this is, like I said, a movement. This can help people. This is how you change lives. And look at these people finishing at 17 hours that have no legs. They have no legs. Some have no arms. Some are tethered. They're blind. I'm like, if these people are doing it, we can get anybody to do it. And I kind of had a light bulb moment, like, maybe we can do this with people that no one would ever expect, like homeless or, whatever.
One of my favorite people on earth is Thich Nhat Hanh, who is the guru in the art of mindfulness. And he often says life is suffering, and the art of a flower as it blooms, it also begins to die. And there's a beauty to that. And I think there's just something, when I heard that about 10 years ago, I was like, whoa.
It's like the lotus.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And there's just something brilliant to that. So with that in mind, when you go back to Vanderbilt, you finish with your degree in humanity, what did you think about if you think back to then, what was suffering then? What was humanity then compared to when you fell in love in 2008? I'm not sure the difference of years, but I'd imagine it was a decent amount of time between when you fell in love with a new craft and when you walked away with a degree supposedly around humanity and organization.
Suffering for me when I was at Vanderbilt? What was that like?
Yeah, what was the definition of that for you then?
Well, then I had never told anybody about my rapes. No one. So that was just this thing on the inside of me that was growing, and I was really suffering. It was tough because I had this awful thing inside of me that I needed to talk about, that it still took me I didn't tell anybody for 12 years. So I didn't tell anybody until I was like 28. So I had all this going on inside of me, but all this shame too, that comes with rapes, that comes, anybody that's had sexual abuse can talk to you about the shame and the guilt and just all these weird, awful feelings that you have inside, and the behavior that comes with it. You start acting out, you start doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It comes out sideways if you don't talk about it. And I wasn't ready to talk about it. So it was coming out sideways in all sorts of ways. I wasn't sleeping, even though I was playing tennis. That's why I was running the steps in the middle of the night. We've looked at it pretty closely now. When I've recognized my behavior my senior year at Vanderbilt was really crazy. I mean, running the steps in the middle of the night, not sleeping, meeting my coach at 5:00 in the morning to have morning practice before morning practice, but I wouldn't have slept yet. So I would just stay up and then meet him at 5:00 and train with him for an hour and then have morning practice with my team at 6. And then, so it's just, my mind was constantly going, and that was real suffering because not sleeping will make you crazy enough. Yeah. And it took a number of years later for me to finally open up about what was going on.
I mean, we met today, and you can tell, I think, as an athletically minded individual, like who's driven, right? And I loved hearing that story of you at 8 of like, you found your edge a little bit, right? And you smoked the 12-year-old. And clearly there's an edge to you as you're describing your senior year at Vanderbilt around the work ethic for you. Did you know, because I was the same way. I suffered from, when I was in college, I had gotten injured and I just kept taking pain pills because I just kept playing. And I was like, I got to play whatever it takes to play. I was the 5 a.m. workout guy. And then I got diagnosed with full body fatigue. And I was at my best, and I remember being crushed. And I didn't play for like the first 6 games of the year because my body was like, oh, we're going to shut down for a little while until you're ready to actually run a route and catch your pass. So I say that on the heels of, did you recognize it, that your drive was like, man, I don't know if this is a good thing right now, Meredith?
I don't think I recognized it until later.
Yeah. Especially
because I was still trying to, I wanted to graduate magna cum laude. I mean, I was psycho. I realize it now that I was really crazy. I mean, I really was crazy. I mean, I would study when I was a kid. I mean, I think about it now, especially, like I said, having kids. I would dictate my notes to myself and sleep with them playing. I mean, that's some bonkers crap right there. I would play them while I slept, like on the weekends, so that they would go into my head while I was like, that's subconsciously. I mean, that's an awful lot. That's getting after it. Yeah. I mean, like, there's some really crazy stuff right there.
Well, there's a sickness, I think, to athletes that doesn't get talked about enough. I'm not proud of this.
Yeah.
But I remember I grew up with a quote on my wall that I put there. Two of them. One was, "You show me a good loser, I'll show you a permanent one."
Yeah, we're a lot alike.
Right? And the other one was, "When you're not working, someone somewhere is. When the two of you meet, given fairly equal ability, he will win." Bill Bradley, senator. Like, what a better idol than you could have. And they were not healthy.
No, my senior quote was, "Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing."
There, no fear
Vince
t-shirts.
Lombardi.
Yeah, here we go.
And I'm actually a pretty deep person. Like, I like quotes now, and I use them with RunningWorks all the time. I'm horrified that was my senior quote, and it's for posterity in my annual.
Right. So I asked that because there's a lot of athletes that'll listen to this conversation that are not gifted like Shaq, for instance. It didn't have don't look like Sam Darnold, first round draft pick at quarterback and 6'4", can make every throw and gifted athletically. So we lean on our work ethic, and that's got Julian Edelman the MVP in the Super Bowl. It's got allowed Tom Brady to win 6 Super Bowl titles or 9 appearances or whatever it is. What do you say to people that are driven to be great? Because that's a beautiful thing, but that can be pseudoly dangerous as that DNA remains a part of us if we don't know how to control it.
Right. But then there's the flip side of that. I coach cross country. Sometimes we have kids, unfortunately, that are driven that way, and they will do anything at all costs. They want to be good. They want to be good. They will do everything we tell them. They'll dot every I. They'll cross every T. They're even getting up in the morning and doing more, but they just don't have the DNA. They just, they're as good as they're possibly going to be, even with the extra work ethic. And that's what's really tough. When you've got a kid that's doing everything and they want to be good so bad, but they're capped out right there. It's what do you tell them? I'm like, okay, buddy, keep putting your heart into it, but I don't know what, this is the best, just do your best, keep doing your best. And then they're just crushed. Right. They're crushed. All the charts they make, everything they do, that's all they're going to get. And that's where it's really, I have trouble with that when I'm coaching a lot.
So we talk to football players a lot around the idea of form versus essence. I give this speech to the top high school quarterbacks in the country every year, and their form is being dictated to them. You're 6'3", 205 pounds. You're a dual threat quarterback. You should go play for 3 years in college and be a first round draft pick. They're told what their form is. Mm-hmm. I do that for a living on television. I project people's forms versus get to know their essence, or as the athlete, share their essence or learn what running has gifted them, the ability and understanding that you can work through things. You can be organizational, like you learned potentially in your major when you were at Vandy. When do you think that clicked for you? Because you're 28, you finally share a horrific moment of your life, and you don't run your first race till 2008. So that intermediate time, I imagine there was a lot happening and reorganizing potentially for you. What was that, and how did that net out to find the light to go run that first race, as you told us?
Well, I mean, I was still really struggling with my sobriety, and I went at 28. I went to treatment for the first time, and I still really struggled. I only went for 30 days, which is not long enough, and that was the first time I talked about any of my abuse, any of the things that happened. And 30 days is just not long enough. It's like they put a Band-Aid on and ripped it off and sent me right back out. Need inpatient treatment for something like that for a lot longer. So I kind of was on a tailspin for a couple years, and then I got it together. And my kids were really young, so I was doing the mom thing. I was like the school mom, the classroom mom, and coaching their teams and doing stuff like that. I also coached my son's tennis team for a long time. I was like the eighth grade boy, which was kind of funny because we only had 7 boys from 5th to 8th grade. So I was always the 8th one, which was really fun. And I enjoyed that a lot. I did that before I coached cross country. So I was kind of doing those things in their formative years, which ironically, I don't think they really remember, because I'm always like, don't you remember? I was a really good mom. I know I have issues, but I also was a really good mom. So it's kind of funny. But then I actually had a pretty bad relapse, went back to treatment, because I never really took care of the major issues. You know, they're going to crop back up if you don't walk through them, as we were talking about. So this time I went to a really, really good place. I was an inpatient for 6 weeks, and then they sent me to a trauma program on a ranch, and I was there for 3 months. And it was a really, really good program where you have to, I mean, talk about walking through fire. It is a Native American program. So it was basically like that. You know, they basically beat it out of you and have you do all kinds of interesting things, equine therapy, you know, very avant-garde kind of interesting stuff to really help you with all of your trauma. And that was great. And so I got out of there and pretty much started, I started running. I wanted to do more wellness things. I broke my foot twice. That's how all of it started. So I got out of there, broke my foot the first time, was in a cast for 6 months, got out of it, broke it within 6 weeks. And then the whole thing started where I had my surgery. And then my husband at the time, I was feeling sorry for myself on the couch. So he had been through it with all this like yo-yo of my recovery. You know, I like just the total yo-yo of I've been so accomplished in all the things that I've done in my life, but this one thing, good Lord, get your recovery straight. You know, so I'm sitting on the couch feeling sorry for myself. I'm on crutches. I have this cast and I'm, whining about something, which is not my MO. I'm not, you can probably tell I'm not a whiner, but I was whining. And he said, you're the most motivated, accomplished person I know. Why are you sitting there whining? Set a goal and just go do something. Because he's also very motivated and accomplished. Played tennis at Notre Dame, just the works. So I said, fine, I'm going to do an Ironman. He's like, whoa, let's not get crazy here. Because I'm a go big or go home person. He's like, no, let's not get crazy here. You don't have a bike. You don't swim. I was like, well, those are easily remedied. I'm going to do an Ironman. So I had my doctor rewrap my cast in Gore-Tex. I started dragging my foot like an anchor in the pool, which my doctor was like a willing participant in this, which is hilarious. It's Dr. Anderson, who's, now the Packers doctor and was the Panthers doctor, orthopedist. So he's hilarious. And his video for being a doctor is pretty funny. He wrapped it in Gore-Tex. So I start dragging it and he let me start doing spin classes, with the cast and kind of half one leg, half the other. And then I went to Ironman Florida and volunteered so that I was guaranteed entry in November. This was July that this happened. And I did my first Ironman within a year. Ran a marathon in May in Prague. Randomly just decided I'm going to go run a marathon in Prague 2 weeks before. Signed up for the marathon in Prague so that I will have run a marathon before I do the Ironman. Totally random. Do the marathon and then did the Ironman in November. And that was the story I told about really falling in love with running.
Yeah, and you're dubbed the Iron Lady by Sports Illustrated, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
So, driven at 6, and then you win at 8 years old, and then driven to get a Scally to UCLA. You become one of the best players in Vandy history. Clearly a driven individual. How did the definition change for you once you got through an Ironman, once you got through multiple marathons? Was it about proving people wrong? Was it about proving you right? Was it about continually diving into more joy? I'm curious if that word evolved for you, because it's not a bad word. I don't want parents to hear this podcast and be like, well, my kid's driven, he's screwed, or she's screwed.
No.
It's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But the controlling of it and the definition of it and the framework of it has shifted for you. And I'm wondering where it did after those experiences.
So for me, I did several Ironmans. So I did the first one. I was like, ooh, I really like that. That was awesome. Let's do 2 next year.
Next year, not in 2 years.
No, let's do 2. So then I did 2 and I was like, ooh, that wasn't so bad. Now let's do. So then the next year after that, I was like, oh, well, there's 2 in Germany that are within 2 weeks. So I went to Germany and I did 2 within 2 weeks. And because I started looking at, there's some really cool epic ones like Roth. Roth is how you actually say it, but it's Roth. And that's this epic, you must do Ironman. It's on the Challenge series. And so I did that one, but then there was a new one that was had the Tour de France in the middle, and I'm obsessed with cycling. And I had my kids with me. So I did Roth in Roth. And then we went to the Tour de France, and it was Lance Armstrong's last one, which was really cool. So we were right on the Champs-Élysées. We got to see the end. We actually saw the time trial. and then followed them on the train. We were on the train with all of them, and then it was really cool. Then we saw them finish on the Champs-Elysees, and then we went back to Germany, and I did one in Regensburg. So there were 2. Then I did one in Florida. So I did 3 that year. So I did Florida 2. I've done Florida 3 or 4 times. I don't know. I don't know. I think 4 times. So then the next year I went a little crazy. I did Texas, and I qualified for Kona. And then I did France, Austria, and Switzerland 3 weeks in a row. And this isn't a bad, like I just found myself just really loving what I was doing. And it's not bad to be motivated like that. Like it was something that was bringing me like true joy. And for as far as France, Austria, and Switzerland, I was motivated also by people thinking I couldn't do it. I will say that. People are like, you're crazy. You can't do that. You can't do that. Especially after you just did Texas, you can't do that. I had a friend actually tell me, well, I could do that, but, it's just stupid. And then, so he came and he did Switzerland. He ended up in the med tent, and it was my 3rd one in 3 weeks, and I didn't end up in the med tent. So I thought that was funny. But so I did all 3 in a row, and it had never been done, male or female. And I was trying to do it within a certain amount of time so that hopefully if it was done again, then at least would be under a certain amount of time, like all within an average of under 12 hours. Because it's hard. It is hard. And it was self-supported. I dragged my bike around myself, to each country. It's 3 different countries. So it's 3 different countries, 3 different Sundays, 3 in a row. And it was really exciting. Everybody kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And that is when I started realizing that I had a voice and that what I was doing could really help people. And because people were like, well, I'll bet on that. I'll bet she can do it. I'll bet she can't. And I raised like $50,000, to give to this charity, the Challenged Athletes Foundation, and who I love. And there's a great story actually that goes along with that, because in Austria, this is how I chose the Challenged Athletes Foundation. In Austria, I'm getting first I'm in the water, and I run into a tether. And I didn't realize it was a tether, and I'm getting all mad. And a blind swimmer tethered to their person. Okay. So I didn't realize what was happening. I still, I'd never run into a tether before. And there's a current, and I thought it was a branch or something. And I'm like pulling on the tether, and I'm like, oh my God. When I finally realized what I did, I'm like, you're an asshole. What are you doing? So I go around the tether, I get out of the water, and I'm being Meredith, and I'm getting out of the water, and I'm like trying to get to my bike, because I swim to get to my bike. I'm not a gifted swimmer. I'm a middle of the pack swimmer. I'm a very good cyclist and a good runner. Cycling is probably my best. So I'm running out of the water to get to my bike, and I knock over someone with no legs. Like someone that is literally trying to get to their legs so they can get out of the water. I'm like, okay, this is a sign. First of all, slow down. Second of all, you got to do something with what you're doing, because this is a selfish pursuit if you don't give back, because, right now it's all about you, and it shouldn't be all about you. I've always had a servant heart. When I was a kid, I asked my mom for a foster child, not a pony, So I really wanted to use what I was doing to help others. And for a while, I was with the Challenged Athletes Foundation. And then that's how I decided to start helping people in our own backyard, is that motivation to really get my hands dirty. I have that passion and that drive, and I wanted to use it for good too.
So what's it feel like to run for something greater than accomplishing a 100-mile race? I mean, you've done 20 races of 50K to 135 milers and 12 full Ironmans. You've done the Badwater 135, the Brazil 135. I mean, you've done pretty much the most badass things you can do in running. So what's it feel like, if you could describe to us the difference between running for you and running for a cause?
When I'm running for a cause, when I'm out there, it's really cool, because my homeless men, women, and children, they get really into it. They want me to bring my award back, or they want me to bring a medal back, or, they want me to tell the stories. They love the stories. And it motivates them to realize that they don't want to give up when they get out there. When they tell me they want to run a marathon, I always say, I'm no dream crusher. If you want to try it, you just are not allowed to quit. You cannot quit. There is no quit. So if it gets bad, there's no DNF. You walk and I will come find you, whether it's a 5K, a 10K, an 8K, I don't care, a half marathon, a marathon. They know, none of them have ever quit, no matter how bad it gets. And I'm so proud of that. None of them. Even if they may be throwing up, their nutrition's off. They start out and they I had one guy start out and run a 1:30 half of the first marathon. And because he is really good, he was trying to go under 3:20, and he was out there forever, but he didn't quit. And for me, the other part of it is when it gets bad for me, I think, God, I'm running a race. Imagine what it's like for them living on the street. I can't complain. What am I complaining about? I'm in the most beautiful place in the world. Death Valley is it's majestic. That's every time I start a race like that, especially when it's an epic one like Badwater or Brazil or even Rouge Orleans, I tear up a little bit because I'm so grateful that I'm able to do that my body will do these things, and that I know that no matter how bad it gets for me, it's not even a comparison to the people I have living in tents or in the cold or, that are unfortunately on park benches are still suffering from, grave mental disorders. It's not even close. So how can I quit when I'm running for them?
Yeah.
Unless I'm about to die. If it's actually a medical thing, then, I always say DNF is did nothing fatal.
What do your two kids think about you right now?
Oh, Lord. Noah, this was really sweet, actually. Noah, my younger one who runs at Furman, sent me the sweetest message. It was National Women's Day in Sports or whatever. And he sent me a text that said, out of the blue, that's what made it so sweet. Happy National Women's Day in Sports. I'd say it's fair to say you've had an awesome career and accomplishments in sports. And I was like, oh, that's probably the sweetest thing you've ever said to me. It's just totally out of the blue. And then Watson he more talks, like, I'll catch him talking to other people about things I've done. He doesn't say anything really to me, but partially that's because he crewed for me at both Badwater and the Furnace Creek 508-mile bicycle race, and I scared the crap out of him. At Badwater, I was fine. I didn't really have any medical issues, but at the 508, he said he's never crewing for me again because I scared him so badly. I lost my vision. I had corneal edema, and I wouldn't get off the bike, and I was kind of like all over the place for a number of hours, like probably like half the race, like 15 of the 30 hours. I was kind of all over the place, and there was a lot of traffic towards the end because they had to change the route, and he just got really worried. So he thinks I'm a little off, I think. But they love me to death. They know I'm definitely unique as a mom. And, but I'm also an alcoholic and an addict. And unfortunately, to be honest, they had to see some of that. And that makes me really sad because if I had just gotten it the first time when I started trying in 2002, they probably wouldn't have remembered. So there's a part of me that's really sad that I didn't get it the first time, but that is a part of my story. And it also has made me really strong, and has made them really resilient. A lot of kids go to college and they haven't had anything happen in their lives. And then one thing happens and they freak out because they don't know what to do with themselves or what to do with adversity. And I think my kids definitely have that nailed. They're tough, and they've learned how to deal with adversity. And one funny story about Watson too is I'm also that mom that when they're hurt, oh, you're fine. Watson had a broken foot at one point. He jumped off this little house and he had a broken foot. And I was like, no, you're fine. And he kept playing soccer on it. And then, he's like, Mom, it really hurts. I'm like, I think you're fine. And he kept playing soccer on it. And then we finally went to the doctor and he had been playing soccer for like 2 weeks on a broken foot. So that's happened a couple times with stuff. So, we have to be real careful about whether I'm being too hard on them sometimes. Yeah. That's happened with a couple things.
Where do you think, like when a race ends, where do you know your head goes? Like sometimes driven individuals, it's like next game mentality. Or are you like, all right, let's reflect. Like what I learn about that. Like when you run, like when I'll run like 4 miles and I'm like, I just processed a lot of stuff right there. That was just 4 miles. I can't imagine 150 or whatever it is for you. So when it ends, do you have a process to allow yourself when you accomplish, because for instance, in air quotes, the marathon, right? We all have a pseudo marathon, whether it's a presentation at work or a wedding or a race. I don't know if we ever really think about our process when it ends versus, okay, next man up, next race, next, opportunity.
Unfortunately, I would say sometimes I am on to the next thing, but I really part of the reason I choose point-to-point races is because they're cathartic. So when they're really long, like Rouge Orleans, when you're running from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, I mean, I like that. I like to feel like I'm leaving my stuff. I'm very conscious about it. Like I kind of talk to myself and I talk to God and I leave it there. Like, okay, I'm leaving part of my junk right here and I'm running all the way to Rouge Orleans, or I'm leaving it in Badwater Basin and I'm running to Mount Whitney and I'm leaving it there. And Brazil 135 is also a point-to-point. I love point-to-point races because that whole catharsis of like running the whole way, I think about it the whole way too. I mean, I'm not just running and like listening to music. I am actually, the wheels are going round and round, because I am a deep person. And unfortunately, I'm a brooder too. I really am. I think probably most addicts and alcoholics are, probably 100%. But I also afterwards, I have gotten better about processing it, because when I first started doing a lot of Ironmans, when we were in Germany, when I was doing the 2 German ones back to back, the morning of the race or the night before the race, I was already on the Ironman calendar figuring out that there were 3 in a row the next year. So I hadn't even done the 2 yet. And my family was sitting there. I was like, oh my gosh, guess what? There's 3 in a row next year. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. And my husband at the time goes, don't you think you should do these 2 first and see how it goes? And because I hadn't done the second one yet. And I was like, oh, it'll be fine. I'm going to go ahead and register. I registered for those before I did the second one, because I was like, what if they fill up? Nah, I'm going to go ahead and register. So I was already on to the next thing. Wow. Then that's not a good thing. Like I've learned to be more grateful, and that's part of recovery too.
Yeah. Do you meditate?
I try.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's also part of that's part of my recovery too. So I try in the morning before I look at my phone or anything, just 10 minutes, with being silent, and, the alarm goes off and I try and I set it 10 minutes earlier than I need to get up. So I'm just quiet for 10 minutes and try and get my thoughts together, what I'm supposed to do for the day. Cause I only, that's one thing that we're taught. We only have today. I can't look at tomorrow. I can't look at yesterday. I only have today, and I need to get my proverbial stuff together for the day. Because I used to not be very good at that. Yeah,
well, it's a challenge for all of us, especially when you got a lot going on. You're a driven individual. Yeah. It's like, well, what do you mean stop? No, I never stop. Yeah. Like when you sleep, I crush it. You know, and
I've gotten better about sleep too.
Dude, I'm with you on that train. So you're running, you're enjoying it. You do your first marathon, you do a couple Ironman, and you start to get sponsors. You got some baller sponsors: Timex, Newton Running, Generation UCAN, bikes. You got a lot of really cool sponsors. When that started to happen to you, I'm curious what it's like when the first one's like, hey, we want to pay you. We want to give you. What's that like for you, where running was this thing you ran through things or away from things, and then you reconfigure your relationship with it, and then people are like, dude, you're baller. Here's some stuff.
Yeah, I was really grateful, because that doesn't just happen either. I think part of it is my personality, because I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. And I was doing some really wacky stuff that was gaining attention, and it's great for the company, Timex was fantastic. I think I said earlier, it's like the best gig in sports. That Timex multi-sport team was one of the best things that happened to me throughout the running. And same with Newton Running. That shoes they've been great to me for over a decade. Same with Generation UCAN. Generation UCAN, they call me the real OG because the company was so young. Same with Newton, that I was one of the first people that they sponsored. And the product worked so well for me that this is a really cool story. At the Boston Marathon one year, they had a reception for Meb, who had just won New York, I think, or he had just medaled in the Olympics, and they had this breakfast for Meb, and they had me come talk. I'm like, I'm talking at a breakfast with Meb. I mean, this is hilarious. You know, he had just medaled in the marathon, and the reason they had me come talk is because I had cut my calories from 225 an hour to 75 calories an hour, and had just done the Ultraman, and I had just run this 100-miler where I had gone from, this is kind of gross, but I threw up like 60 times in 100-miler. And then I did another one and I didn't throw up at all. And I basically cut my time in half, like I negative split it. And it was really cool to hear Meb say, imagine if I negative split and cut my time in half, you know, like, because it was a really small little reception. There were only like 30 people there. And I was like, it was, you know, I have pictures from it, and they had like one of the Patriots was there, and it's like, this is really cool. I haven't been doing this very long, and they're having, you know, I'm getting to speak to someone about my nutrition needs that is like one of the best marathon runners ever. And yeah, it was, I'm very grateful for that because like I said, their sponsors are hard to get, especially with ultra running, really good ones like that, because it's not a huge thing on the map yet. And Ironman is, there's a million people doing it now. You know, there's so many people doing Ironman at this point that, you know, it's kind of saturated. Ultraman's a little different. Ultraman, I was the 13th female ever to complete an Ultraman. And that I would have to say, was my favorite race ever, actually. You know, it's a 10K swim, a 265-mile bike, and a 52.4-mile run. And it was in Wales. And it was right after a hurricane, and everything was just going crazy. The water was like 52 degrees. I had to wear all this stuff on my head and on my hands and on my feet. And I don't like cold. So it was a real challenge for me. I was standing at the water like I don't want to get in there. And so I would say I was the most challenged ever at that race because, I mean, I had mild hypothermia when I got out of the water, and they had to pour hot water all over me. I still had to get on my bike. It was tough. I mean, it was really, really hard, and I played catch up the whole time, and still ended up getting second, but it was really, really tough. And once I got into it, you know, and, you know, kind of my brain started working again after the hypothermia. It was the coolest race ever. It really was.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine. I can only imagine how stoked your sponsors are to have you on their team. I've met a couple ultra runners. I ran one marathon in my life. I'd broken my neck playing football. Didn't really know it. Just kept playing. Didn't want to get looked at. And then finally I'm out here in LA and I'm like, I really can't feel my arms and legs. Oh. So I get it fixed. And the doctor's like, you're never going to run again. You're never going to surf again. I was like, that's cool. Ran a marathon like 8 months later and surfed 10 months later. That being said, in the LA Marathon, I ran beside Dean Karnazes and got to know him. He was like the face of that marathon that year. And Pete Carroll, who's a mentor of mine, was the ambassador or so of the LA Marathon. It was the first year in LA when it went from the stadium, Dodger Stadium, to the sea in Santa Monica. It was epic. And I remember talking to Dean about his story, and he has this great story. People don't know it. He's like 30 or 32, and he's with his buddies. He's at a bar, and he's like, my life sucks. And goes and runs 30 miles that night in the middle of the night and eats a pizza afterwards. Like, I think I'm going to dedicate my life to running. Or whether it's David Goggins, who the world knows, or your story that has been told countless times. What is it about people that, maybe it's just the ones we know, that are insanely gifted in this space that have had to compete through something? Because I could say the same thing about football, right? Or basketball. And maybe that's the issue, that because running's not a mainstream, ultra running maybe isn't a mainstream enough for people not to know, but I'm curious your take on that.
Well, I mean, I think actually there's so many stories that we don't know. You know, the ones that, I guess the ones that have had some success. I know Dean, and I love Dean. Dean's great. We were looking at a picture from Badwater because I was at Badwater the year that I got third. I was 20. David was 18 and Dean was 17, and we were together for a long time. And Dean he was trying to psych me out. He was so funny. We get to the top of like Towns Pass, and he's like, this is where it gets really hard.
Come on, man. You don't know me.
Like, thanks, Dean. And he had Rich Roll, who's another really, yeah. Rich Roll was on his crew. Rich is like laughing at him because he knew he was trying to, I was like, Dean, you're trying to psych me out. I mean, it was really funny because I'd seen him we did a double marathon for the San Francisco Marathon. We ran it backwards and then forwards, both of us. us like 2 weeks before, or 3 weeks before that. And so I had seen him there, and I was like, well, I beat you at the San Francisco Marathon, like as a joke, because he wasn't trying. He just like ran from his house. So it was funny. He's great. But I think that there's so many stories, whether it be football or ultra running or whatever, that we don't even know, I think ours, like David Goggins has been through a lot. He's had a lot of health issues. I've had a lot of health issues. Dean's story is just great, and he's the most prolific ultra runner that we have. He's just run so many races and been around for so long, and he's so likable. So that's why we know so much about Dean too. And he clears lactic acid probably faster than anybody on the planet. Yeah. So, because he runs right at that threshold, and he just has got it nailed down. He could probably run forever, know?
So speaking of stories, I want to touch upon your organization. I'm fascinated by it because of your commitment to it and what you're doing in the Charlotte community. When it started, do you have one of the early stories from somebody that was like, yeah, running, like it kind of saved my life too? Oh, yeah.
So most of them come back. They come back and they pay it forward and they want to be a part of the organization. I would say probably 90%. We have some that have been there for 6-7 years, that are coming back and paying it forward. One of my guys, his name is Chuck. He's one that went 3:56 in the marathon, literally off a park bench. And he was one of the original runners. And we were founded in April 12th, 2012, and he's one of the originals. And he had been on the street for, his story's amazing. He had been on the street for like 6-7 years, but he's really, really smart. Like his dad had a PhD in English. But because of that, he really grew up being told like he wasn't smart. He's not going to amount to anything. You're never going to do anything. And that's kind of the story with a lot of them. So he has some other mental health issues, but he is a hell of an athlete, like just unbelievable. And if you give Chuck like a goal, he gets really competitive. And I told him he had run one before. And then I told him, okay, the half started looking really good. I trained with him. I'd meet him every Sunday in addition to the runs that we do throughout the week. And we'd meet on Sunday because he'd also get food after. So that's all. You tell them they're going to get fed, they'll go anywhere. So he's been on a cover of a magazine for us too, called Endurance Magazine. Yeah, it's a really cool. He was awesome because he's a really photogenic guy too, and he got some press in our local paper for this too. But I met him every Sunday, and we would run. We started out with like 10 to 12 miles, and we capped out with like 22. And he would just truck along with me, and we were running pretty quick. Like, I'd have him running like consistent 8-minute miles, 7:45s, whatever. And then for the marathon, this is the funny part. For the marathon, he got real competitive with me. So I'm carrying his nutrition, and I had just run New York pretty quick the week before. So I'm carrying his nutrition, and I'm like, Chuck? And he starts to have one of his little, he's like having a little bit, because he's starting to hurt, and he's having a little bit of a mental breakdown. He starts to surge to like 6:20s, every now and then, which is not good. Obviously you're going to bonk if you do that. I was like, Chuck, you're going to bonk if you keep doing that, and you're not going to drop me. I'm going to be able to stay with you, So he kept doing that over and over and over again, thinking he was going to drop me, and he ended up just bonking a little. So I finally threw his water bottle at him, which was really funny. Which, everybody else around us, we've got RunningWorks t-shirts on, So I'm like, Chuck, I'm yelling at him. He's yelling back at me. I'm yelling at. So we have our shirts on, and everyone's like, the RunningWorks people are crazy, So he ends up. He wants to walk the last mile, and he's going to go under 4 hours. So I'm behind him, pushing him up this hill, and he makes it 3:56. But anyway, long story long, he has a job. He has housing. He's had it for a couple of years now. He comes back. He's a real miracle, because he's one that was chronically homeless, not situationally homeless. He was a chronically homeless man, which means he had been homeless more than a year, and people thought he could never be helped. And he's doing great. We have several others that, Lamar's another one. He's run 3 marathons, 3 years in a row. His first half marathon, he went 3:10, and now he has gone 1:44 for a half marathon and 4:12 for a full, which is, And he's run 9 half marathons and 3 full marathons. And he has employment, housing, mental health care through our program. He comes to every program. He struggles a little bit, but I think it's progress, not perfection. That's what we say. He's one that I really want to do some longer stuff with. I think he's got it in him. He's like a little metronome, and he stays right with me. I've run every one of his races with him. And he just stays right with me. He's very teachable. He doesn't do like Chuck. He's very teachable. Just stay right behind me.
So why? I mean, you've such an eclectic background in sport, in recovery, in family, in travel. Why homelessness? Why did you dedicate your craft, your business, your life to that?
I feel such a kinship with them. I really do. I like to hang out with them better than I do my friends. I really do. They're my family. I mean, I love them. They're so amazing and resilient, and what they've been through is so similar to what I've been through that, you may look at Lamar and he's this 6'2" black male that's 28 years old, and he looks totally different than me, but on the inside, he's the exact same. Substance abuse issues, trauma, mental health issues, loves to run, but he hasn't had the assistance I've had. He's just had me, I'm his family. I'm like his mom. And he still calls me, even after 6 years, Miss Meredith. And I love it. He's never been rude to me a day in his life, but he will flat take somebody else's head off. Right. It doesn't matter. He's always been polite to me, but somebody else, he will take their head off.
So what was your first experience with someone who was homeless?
I think even when I was little, I told you I always wanted to help people, and I was never the person that walked by a homeless person on the street. I'd always stop, I'd sit down, I'd talk to them. My dad used to come on, Meredith. I was like, Dad, I'm going to talk to this person. And he's like, oh, brother. And they'd keep walking, and I'd sit down on the ground and talk to somebody, It still happens, because now I can't walk down the street and try. I know all of them, Yeah. They're like, hey, it's the running lady. And I love that. We go to a Panthers game, and they're all yelling at me. I'm with my family, and Noah just laughs. It's like, it's great. And I'm trying to think my first interaction. I am on the board of the Urban Ministry Center of Charlotte, which is, the first time I went there was a friend asked me to have a table for their True Blessings luncheon, which is like over 1,000 people. And I didn't know what I was going to be getting into. I like to know. So I said yes, but I went to a lunch and learn. So I came on the campus there, and you either walk on the campus at the Urban Ministry Center, which is a day shelter. And there's hundreds of homeless people there. You either walk on the campus and you go, oh my God, this is my home. These are my people. I'm staying here forever. Or you walk on and you go, holy crap, I'm running away. I'm not going any further. This is terrifying, because it is crazy. They're all yelling at each other. There's people talking to themselves. They're banging their heads against a wall. They're like throwing food. It's crazy. But I feel home there. I feel like I'm at home. And so I went to the lunch and learn, and somehow in the middle of the lunch and learn, I didn't even know what I was saying. I was like, have you ever thought about running with them? To the executive director. I wasn't on the board yet, obviously. And he's like, no, but we never tell a volunteer they can't do something. You're welcome to try. And that's how it started. So I started it there. And now we have, our own headquarters. We have washer and dryer. We have 5 laptops. We have our own we have a closet full of probably 2,000 pairs of shoes. We have, a whole nother closet full of toiletries and excess clothes they can wear. We have a whole rack of interview clothes. We have counseling rooms. I mean, we moved across the street so they can still go to the Urban Ministry Center and get lunch, but it's pretty cool.
And I'm not sure where your dad is, but when you started working with the homeless, what did he say?
My dad is actually he's pretty involved.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's funny because he, at first he was like, oh boy, anyone who knows me well knows that it was, because at first it was just people, the misconception is that we're a running club for homeless people. And then you hear me say that we have that our headquarters has all these things, and that, we've housed 27 people just since June in proprietary housing for RunningWorks. Where we're the lessee, RunningWorks is the master leaseholder, and, we're not giving them a fish, we're teaching them how to fish. They have to earn their, they pay their rent. We're not giving them a voucher. It's pretty cool. So it's a big program. It's not a running club for homeless people. However, that is how it started. So everyone who knows me well knew it was probably going to end up being something like, go big or go home. I don't think I even realized it was going to end up morphing into such a structured, cool program, because now we're at a point where we've found a structure that's really going to work. We're at this great point where we can grow it exactly the way it is with the structure in place to as big as we want to make it. A couple years ago, we had our hands in all kinds of stuff because I've learned this. Now let's try this. I've learned this. Let's try this. But we had to hone it in, and we're in a good spot. So my dad has kind of watched all of that. And now that the structure is really good, he's kind of investing in it and likes to come, and he'll come to the Christmas party, and he'll come to the gala, and he brings his friends. And it's cool to see him really taking stock in it.
That's beautiful. There's a film coming out here in Venice called Unzipped 90291. A good friend of mine is doing it, and it's about on the same block, extremely wealthy family, middle-class family, homeless family. And that's what you have here.
Cool.
And even prior to our conversation, my neighbor was fascinated with your story, because Venice Beach is kind of the homeless capital of the world to a large degree. And I love this community because it's exactly what you referenced. I've walked down the street. Hey, what's up, man?
Yeah.
I mean, my family, we had lunch with a homeless family. Took my sister and her kids. We sat next to them, and we just hung out, next to the bank about a month ago. Yeah. And I think her at first was like, what's happening? And then we just sat down, and it was like a great hour-long lunch.
They're fascinating people.
They're people,
because their stories are incredible.
I think that, and they're humans.
Stories of resiliency and just the things they've been through. It's like trumps anything that we could talk about. Like my story, I haven't been through anything compared to the things I've heard. I mean, honestly, what am I whining about? Giving so much of myself is a no-brainer. Right. It's a no-brainer. And I also want to challenge, part of why I do what I do is I want to challenge that stigma associated with the homeless. I'm going to do what I'm doing until it's different. And then I'm going to keep doing it, because there's such a misconception about who they are, and they're just like us. They just have lost their way, and I need to help them get right back on that path.
So if you think about it, when you're 8 years old and you go up to the net and you say, how old are you? And you had a pseudo definition of what it meant to be human then. And now you're going up to the starting line and saying, maybe, where are you from? What's your story? What's your definition of humanity now?
Oh, never underestimate anybody, and always listen. Open your ears and listen and talk to, walk up to, I feel like we can learn something from absolutely anybody we talk to. And if you don't learn something from everybody you talk to, then your ears are closed. It doesn't matter who they are. And I tell our people that we work with that all the time, because, sometimes they get into it. They get into, we're a family, we're this big team and family. And when you interview one of them, that's what they say is their favorite thing about RunningWorks is they feel like they've found a home and they've found a place to go. It's something that they've never had, because we do family dinners, we do family lunch. We literally, sometimes we have 25, 30 people in a restaurant. I teach them how to order food and use their manners and re-enter society in a positive way. And I'm like, nope, cute and cuddly boys. Yes. And, please and thank you. Because not give me this. I need some mustard, and it's really fun, and they don't mind. They let me know. Yes, ma'am. Okay. But and I'm like, don't call me ma'am. You don't have to do that. Just say please and thank you. Right. That's it. And it's really cute. But I would say, because when they start to get on each other, and they don't, because we have a no crosstalk, we do life skills, and we sit in a group, and they can't poo-poo what anybody else says. It's a safe place. So my definition of humanity is to let everybody tell their story. Let everybody, listen to what they have to say. You can find the similarities and not the differences. Find something you like out of what anybody says, even if you totally disagree. There's always something in there that you can use. Something.
I can't help but think about you. I interviewed a guy named Melvin Gordon, running back for the Chargers, and he talked about he would run in the middle of the night in college too. So I have this vision of you working out super late, and then I have this vision of you running these crazy races that I would maybe ride a bike at. And now I have a vision of you pushing a guy through the finish line who was once homeless.
Literally behind him, pushing him. I had to do that with Lamar this year too.
So why do you run now?
Now I mean, gosh, lately I've literally been running for them. I mean, my latest races have all been with them. I've been so consumed with RunningWorks and getting a seat at the housing table, and so consumed with helping them, because now that I've been doing this for so long, there are some of the people that I serve that have been waiting for a housing voucher for 4 and 5 years. You know, they're on the list and they're waiting in Charlotte, North Carolina for a housing voucher that has not come. They're told 2 weeks. 6 weeks. And then in 6 weeks comes up another 6 weeks. And I'm like, okay, this has been going on for 4 and 5 years. All right. And I've been around now that long. So I was like, screw it. I'm doing something myself. You know, like, I'm not waiting around for this stupid voucher that is never going to come, because we have several like that. So in June, I just set to work. Actually, I started it in May. I set to work in May. Like, I'm not waiting any longer. I don't care what it costs us. If it takes my own money in the beginning, we will find the funding. And it did. It took my own money in the beginning, and then we found the funding. So I invested in it myself, but I was like, we're going to figure this shit out. You know what? So I had a contact. I reached out to her. She set me up with somebody. And by June, we were housing people in a master lease program, because I had the lady come over to my house, and I said, this is my idea. This is how we can do this. It's going to be very structured. I have all these rules for them. We're not going to just put them in housing. They have to earn it. But I'm not waiting any longer. These vouchers are not working, and our people are floundering. They're intense. It's going to get cold. I'm not going through another winter with them being outside. And they were open-minded enough to try it with us. And now there's a whole campaign. They started a thing called the Lotus Campaign, which is really cool. So after we started the first master lease program, they started a whole campaign. These people, he owns a bunch of apartment complexes, and it's called the Lotus Campaign. And now they've housed 60 some people through the Lotus Campaign, and 27 of them are ours, just since June.
Wow.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. How can we help? I mean, a lot of people run. It's the biggest sport on planet Earth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that we want to start doing is having these, you know, where you can do a race for charity, and you raise money for RunningWorks and you do the race. So it's pretty simple. We have a great, through our website, runningworks.org, we have an easy donation site. So we use a great, everything's like, they don't take a cut of anything. So it's all on the website. What's it called? So we just started it this past year. We're not using anything where they take a percentage. So it'd be really easy for somebody to we could create a page for them off of that. Yeah. And then they just raise money and do the race. And, you know, it's easy to tell people, what the mission is and who they're raising money for. And all of that basically would go right back into subsidized rental, or, things for buying them things for their houses, like towels and things like that. Cause I call it the Insta house. What we're doing right now is also totally unique. We're not using vouchers for furniture. I reach out to our, home base, via social media, and people have been amazing. So I say, we're moving somebody like this next Friday, we're moving a domestic violence victim and her 2 kids into another apartment. They got thrown out of a moving car on Christmas Eve, and I found them on the 28th of December. They came over from the Urban Ministry Center because they had been just kind of sleeping on benches and stuff, and somebody told them to come over to me. I've had them in a hotel since then, and I did get them housing now through the Lotus Campaign. And so people like that, I reach out and I say, we need 2 twin mattresses. We need a queen mattress. We need this. We need that. We put it in storage, which we did this week. And then we wait until they move in. I go take everything over, armoires, everything. I set up the whole house, kitchen table, everything in one day. Boom, Insta house. They move in, they've got it all. Towels. We have Family Dollar that helps us with soap, paper towels, toilet paper. So all of those things are necessities, but they cost money. The paper towels and all that get donated, but move-in items are always desperately needed. Move-in kit costs like $250.
Do you feel like people are afraid of homelessness?
Oh, they're terrified of it.
Because it's a fundamental. It's like a Maslow hierarchy of need, right? Food, water, shelter, and we all relate to it. But it's this epidemic in LA. Of course, it continues to grow in Charlotte, as you referenced, and I just can't help but my heart breaks when I think of a mom and her kids being move,
Well, the
hopefully
worst
not
was,
thrown out of a moving car, but you just described someone.
It was the 10-year-old's birthday on the 28th, and it just broke my heart. The kids are so well behaved. The mom is fantastic, and she's the epitome of RunningWorks. She's the ideal. She's done everything she was supposed to do since she came in because, like I said, it's very structured. We've created this awesome structure where they have to earn what they're given. They have to earn the housing. They have to come and they volunteer. Volunteerism is one of our core values because I believe no matter what you have to give it away in order to keep it. You have to, or you're not going to go anywhere. So she's shown up and volunteered at multiple races. She brings her kids. She even shows up at our young adult program for the kids in foster care that have cycled out of foster care. And she helps give out food. I mean, she has been everywhere. She's shown up for every one of her appointments on time, which is accountability. So we have all these little boxes that they have to check off. She signed the contract, which, says that she has to do certain things in order to gain her points for transportation, but then we have other people who come that are like, why'd she get housing so fast? I'm like, because here's the layout. This is how you do it. And you can see who's really motivated, just like we're talking about motivation and drive. Some people just have fallen on hard times, and that's what people don't realize when they're hard on homeless people. Like, they're not lazy. They're really not. Most of them, especially if they come to RunningWorks, they're highly motivated because we make them do a lot of stuff. And they have to be at our office at 5:30 in the morning to volunteer for races. 5:30 in the morning. That's what people can't believe. And they beat me there. I'll be late, and they're standing outside like, where are you? You need to be here, Well,
I get the chills thinking about the idea of the word drive because it's different. And it shapes and molds and moves. It's like water. It forms around a variety of different things. And here these homeless people are, and they're driven to have a roof. And yeah, they're going to show up at 5:25 and beat you to work in the morning of a race. And I think that's fascinating. So we've taken a ton of your time, but I want to ask you a couple questions before we get you out of here. One is, if you finish the sentence, it all comes down to, what do you answer?
I would say it all comes down to, especially in this day and age, it all comes down to being open-minded. I mean, we have, and being patient. I mean, we have people come in that it takes what it takes. Sometimes our board gets frustrated because I'll help somebody for years, but it takes what it takes. I have somebody that just finally got it, and he's been with us for 5 years, but it took him 5 years, and now he's doing great. Or another guy that's our model RunningWorks team member right now, and he just got housing, but he was homeless for 8 years. And he's the one that's paying the exact amount of rent he's supposed to pay. It takes him 2 hours to get to the job we set up for him, and he does it. He has to take a bus for 2 hours and walk a mile to get to his job in the middle of the night. And he's been doing it now for 6 months. And he has housing, and he's paying his rent, and he shows up for his meetings. And so, and he actually is one of the ones that kind of looks, if you looked at him, you'd probably judge him. But you got to be open-minded because the guy's really smart. He's just had a really rough life. And we had to be patient with him because he's also got some mental health issues, and we've got his meds on the right track now. But someone would have everybody else wrote him off. He couldn't go to any other program if he went. No one believed in him. And we just waited. We just let him get it together. He's been in and out of all kinds of systems, but it took him this long to get it. And I think that's the same with everything, really. Open-mindedness. I mean, right now our whole society is so crazy with everything, I just try not to judge anybody. I try and keep an open mind when I meet people because, like I said, I try and learn something from everybody.
Yeah. So the follow-up naturally is, what are you seeking then?
Oh, I would love to seek peace. I don't have a lot of peace. That was sort of my word for the year. We did that with all our RunningWorks team members. They had to put a word for the year up on our board, and mine was peace. Because, doing what I do is not for the faint of heart. It's very stressful. It takes a lot out of me mentally and physically. It's, 7 days a week. And I mean, boundaries would be another one. But I think peace for all of them too. They're in constant turmoil in their heads. But I need peace as well. So that would be, that would be a big one. I need to try and set the program up a little better where it's not all falling to me. They're not going, they do that with our staff sometimes where it goes from one staff member to the next. And it all comes back to me because I think I'm going to take care of it for them, like mom. So yeah, that would be my word for the year, finding some peace for myself and for them.
And we ask everyone on this podcast over the last couple of years the same final question. So I'm curious how you feel about the word limits.
I don't feel like anybody has limits. I really don't. So when people say, oh, I could never do that, I say anybody can do that. Or I could never run 135 miles. I can only run to my refrigerator. Like, no, I guarantee you could run 135 miles. It's all what you're limiting yourself in your head. Because a great friend of mine says running is 90% mental and the other 10% is all in your head. Because everything is. Literally everything is. No one has limits. We're only limited by our imagination. And that's what I truly, truly believe. I grew up with a mom that told me I could do anything. And that's also why I started my program. Because I'm working with people who are told they'll never amount to anything. So I try and be like my mom with them. You can do anything. What are you talking about? You can do anything. Anything. You just have to turn your head around and, if this is what you want to do, let's work on that. Not going to crush your dream. Let's figure it out. I really don't believe in limits at all, especially with myself.
Yeah.
So if I want to do something, I'm going to go for it.
Love that. Okay. Bonus question. The producer of this podcast, Stuart Gill, you coached him. He's booked you on this podcast. Yeah. What was it like to coach this dude?
Oh my gosh. Stuart was a joy. He was so easy. And now it's so exciting that he's going to be running a marathon. So obviously he liked it. Yeah. So Stuart was really easy. He came, I only had you for 1 year, right? Yeah. I had Stuart for 1 year and I wish we had more Stuarts because he was super easy. And I never caught him walking. There's lots of stories about me catching people walking and kind of getting up their butts about it. But Stuart always did what he was told. And he was like one of the nicest kids we had because there's some stinkers over there. But I have a funny story about that, actually. I don't know if you saw, the Murdoch relays. So we have this thing where we dress up every year at this one relay. And one of the kids, this is probably my favorite coaching story. One of the kids dressed up as me this year for the Murdoch relays, and he had on black pants and a trucker hat, which I always wear. And it was spot on. Okay. And he's running around going, stop dicking around to the kids, like laughing at, it was really funny. Just telling the kids that they, just being kind of hard on them. Like, no, you need to run faster. Don't walk, just really funny. And he looked just like me. We took a pic. I often wear a long sleeve shirt tied around my, shoulders, and he had that too. You would have died. It was pretty funny.
I love that. Well, this was a joy. Well,
thank you for having me.
Yeah. How can people stay in touch with you?
So I have the best way probably is the RunningWorks Instagram. It's at RunningWorks. We also have at running_works on Twitter. And then my Twitter handle is at Meredith Dolhare. Right?
Yeah,
yes.
Stuart's got it. Yeah. Okay, perfect. That'll all be in the show notes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, and our website is runningworks.org.
Yes, we'll have that in there as well. Producer Stuart Gill, thanks for hooking
Thank
this
you, Stuart.
up. Meredith, an absolute joy. Can't be more thankful for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, we end this thing the same way every time. The only limits that we have in life are the ones we set ourselves. Peace.